as long as you have the right reporting, as Jen said, and you're tracking the right KPIs, then you'll know if the learning isn't landing the way it's supposed to.
One of the things that we do well is kind of take principles of the best retailers in the world and apply those in spaces that are not traditionally retail, but using those same principles. So
we need to have what we call result strategies with all of our associations. So we will sit down and figure out, what are your objectives? What are your, how are you going to get to those objectives? What sort of solutions are you going to put in place to get there?
Welcome back to the Lessons for Tomorrow podcast, a motivational poster in your ear. I'm your guest host, Steven LaGow, Partner Director here at AmericanEagle.com. In this episode, we're going to be diving into transforming association connection and revenue growth with learning. To discuss this, I'm joined by Jen Rosney, Strategic Customer Success Leader at LearnUpon, and Guillaume Delloue, Strategic Partner Development Manager at HubSpot. Pleasure to have you guys. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Steven. Glad to be here.
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
If you guys would want to spend a second here and introduce yourselves, a little bit about where you kind of fit in the ecosystem, and before we dive in, would love to hear a little bit more, Jen.
Sure. Yeah. So Jen Rosney, I am a manager on our strategic success team. So I've been with LearnUpon about 3.5 years, actually coming on to 4 years. And the main remit for my role is that I work closely with some of our largest customers, namely associations, actually, to help them get the most out of their learning platform. So that's from onboarding all the way through to scaling their programs over time. So that, along with mentoring 3 of our senior strategic CSMs and managing, it keeps me extremely busy. You can imagine. So yeah, glad to be here. I'll hand over to Guillaume.
Thank you, Jen. So yeah, my name is Guillaume. I am a strategic PDM at HubSpot. I've been at HubSpot for just about 10 years next year, and the entire time in the partner program. So I work mainly with our biggest partners, more strategic partners, such as American Eagle. And my real role is really to help them grow within the ecosystem, sell more hostile licenses, and make sure that we have happy customers. And I'm stoked to be here.
I appreciate you both spending some time with us. We're coming to this podcast in the angle. We're working together, American Eagle, HubSpot, and LearnUpon, to help to build a campaign around our focus and our goal about helping associations mature. We want to help connected systems and strategies in place to put associations in successful positions. So from our perspective, I think our hypothesis as a collective here, we've been working on this for a little while, would be this: that associations must prioritize connected learning and marketing communication strategies powered by symbiotic systems to unlock new revenue and deliver seamless experiences for members and constituents. Now, that's chock full of jargon, but the idea being that learning, coupled with appropriate communications and marketing strategy and segmentation, is actually a revenue driver. I know one of the challenges we see in a lot of folks is, non-dues revenue and the post-COVID world, and how do we stay relevant in front of these folks, and that's the beginning and the end of us, the beginning and the end of that thought, and why these, the 3 companies here coming together to help highlight this. So, Jen, from your perspective, thinking about some of the challenges that you help customers unlock, when they come to the table and they're looking for like a learning solution, can you talk a little bit about where that originates, or sort of what success looks like for them? Is it really on the technology side? Is it the process side?
Sure, absolutely. Just to go back to your hypothesis there, because I think it's a really key framing thought here for this conversation. And I'll start with that, if I may, and then I'll look at some of the successes that we see when it comes to associations and some of the challenges actually with that. So typically, we see a lot of siloed departments within associations, particularly the ones that we work with. And we work with some extremely large associations across the US, across Europe, across APAC. And in my experience, they are siloed. If we don't start looking at unifying systems and strategies, then we completely miss a huge opportunity to truly serve members and the members are what drive these associations. Okay, and we're talking revenue streams, we're talking real, real life scenarios here that have the ability to either make or break these associations. So CRM systems like HubSpot and LMS platforms like LearnUpon are key, in my opinion, here to driving these revenue streams. So if we can sit down and untap some of this wealth of potential that these associations have access to, not just in their content, but in the connections between learning platform and marketing ecosystems like HubSpot, that's where the sweet spot, that's where we see real revenue and real success coming through. And that also then means that we can drive more personalized member experiences. And that's what we all want nowadays, particularly with the emergence of AI. We don't want to feel like we're being served up another generic, paragraph or piece of content. And just because I've put your first name into the start of the email, it doesn't mean it's personalized. So we've got to look at more clever ways of personalizing our member experiences. And that's what we work really hard at doing, both in LearnUpon and with our partner HubSpot. And ultimately, that's what drives new revenue streams. That's what you get when you genuinely serve member needs at every stage of their journey. You sit down and you understand what it is they're looking for. It's not just another tool or a shiny new thing. It's start small and build slowly. And then we can really tap into, some of the successes that we see with some of these associations.
That idea, start small and build slowly, I think is a good piece of life advice, but specifically in business here, I think one of the things that we've run into with challenges, and this applies sort of, our role in this space is sort of digital transformation and connecting all of these things. We are not a LMS tool, but we help integrate the tool with commerce and with CRM, and the front end of the site and their form conversions and their user journeys alongside of something like HubSpot is, when we start thinking about and having these conversations, a lot of folks kind of come in doe-eyed. It sounds like too much and I can't do anything. Right. And so one of the things that I really like, hearing you say that is there are steps to be taken that move, sort of the rock up the hill that aren't necessarily, you don't have to feel like Sisyphus, where you're endeavoring to do this thing that is undoable. And what are those things, and how can we, highlight some of those key items as we move forward? Guillaume, I think as we think about what HubSpot is today and where it will be, moving forward, inbounds in a month, the big HubSpot event for the year. Jen touched on it a little bit here, and thinking about what does that mean for actually personalized and meeting content and the right folks in the space of what AI will become. Sort of how do you on the HubSpot side of the house, and how does HubSpot think about building in such a way that allows for many of these disparate systems, commerce and learning, to come into HubSpot and leveraged across sort of this omni-channel space?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I like what Jen said about kind of silos, and how that's sort of, I think, one of the bigger issues today in business is that people work in silos, and HubSpot was really designed to break down these silos. And I think for us, at a very simplistic level, it starts with our CRM and the contact record. So HubSpot gives you the visibility to see how contact moves from one stage to the next. And, so for example, you can see which pages a member may have looked at on your website and then connect back to their overall learning. So you have full visibility into what contacts are doing. And that kind of goes back to being able to track first-party data, because as we know, it is harder and harder to get access to that data. It's incumbent on companies to actually generate their own first-party data by tracking this information within their own CRM. And to go back to the AI piece, Steven, ultimately, your AI tools are only as good as the data that you're feeding it. And so whether you're using HubSpot or you want to use a different tool, that's fine with us, but use a tool that allows you to track the full journey and be able to leverage that data in the different tools that you're using. So yeah, it's critical to have a tool that at least can do that, so you can power the data out of the future, so you can make AI actually work for you and be usable.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me. You talk about good data in makes things work, and I know Jen, LearnUpon has learning journeys as you think about that within the actual platform is for, for these different segments. How do you guys think about using those sorts of learning journeys to tailor those paths for specific learners? And where does that information, both in the LearnUpon tool, but in some of the other successes that you've seen for customers, what are they doing with that kind of information, sort of our best in breed?
Sure. Yeah. And I think learning journeys is relatively new. We're talking about maybe 18 months since we've launched that piece of functionality, but it has really evolved in that in those 18 months. And we're still not at the end. We're still optimizing. What we've seen with our largest customers in the strategic space and some of these niche and nuanced associations and what they need structured guided learning. They need to be able to bring a learner through a specific sequence, not just hand out static, courses that a learner clicks on, works through and completes. So audiences have become a lot more sophisticated in their requirements. So therefore, as a vendor, as an LMS provider, we've got to do exactly the same thing. So that's what we've done with Learning Journey. So really it's designed to help these associations, to help learners progress through training in a really logical, purposeful way, which is aligned then with their skill development. And that's key here because that's how we're going to really drive engagement is personal skill development. That's what these associations are looking for. It's how they're driving member engagement and therefore unlocking those revenue streams that they, are sought after. So that's what learning journeys will do. Sequential learning, customized learning paths. You can report on it. It's extremely sophisticated. There's a lot of progress tracking that happens in the midst of it. You can automate all of your enrollments. It doesn't matter if you're in this country, that region, that team, that role. You can design a learning path to help your learner, regardless of what association they may sit in, and regardless of what political situation they might find themselves in as well. Because let's face it, that actually is affecting a huge amount of what's happening with these associations right now, particularly across the US. So that's what learning journeys will do, and we're seeing great success with it, and that's why we're taking a lot of feedback from customers, and we're really using it to drive the product forward. So,
are you able to extract some of that information, or are some of your most successful customers taking that and applying that path to other applications? So, thinking about we're talking about this connected marketing ecosystem. How do they arrive on the site, and what are they doing based on some of that information, or communication strategies on the backside of this? We at AE do a lot of commerce, and I think that one of the things that we do well is kind of take principles of the best retailers in the world and apply those in spaces that are not traditionally retail, but using those same principles. So thinking about the kind of thing like an abandoned cart, you've started this learning journey and you haven't completed it yet. Or also, I got to this space and people also like this content. Are some of those customers extracting, some of that information and using it in a lot of those different places?
yeah, no, they absolutely are. It's driving a lot of what they're doing next. So they're using the information to create multiple training types. So they might look at a particular learning path, and then from that, they'll develop particular content based on maybe where a learner drops off. And like what Guillaume said with HubSpot, LearnUpon does a very similar thing with a learner journey. They will actually tell you where a learner has really disengaged from the content that you're actually offering. Very, very similar to landing on web pages and that kind of thing. So we can really drill down and get very granular with exactly what our learners are doing and what behaviors they're displaying whilst they're consuming content. And that can then drive future learning programs because you'll know exactly, I've included too much information here. This is too theory heavy, or maybe this video is too long, or they try to fast forward something. So you can be that sophisticated with your learning journey. And that is retrievable information that the customer can then use to inform future programs. But I think one of the most powerful things around a learning journey, apart from the automation that it actually affords you, is the reporting aspect. So you can sit back and actually pull all of these really, really granularized reports. And as a leader, myself in the customer success team, we actually use learning journeys ourselves to bring our own staff and our own employees, lookers is what we call them, LearnUpon employees, through all of their compliance and security training. And I can tell you firsthand, it's powerful information to have at your fingertips, and it does help drive and inform future decisions for your content.
Yeah, I really like that. I think, the allowing the, systems and technology continue to get smarter and more mature, but leveraging that information that you have invested in is really kind of the secret sauce. And I think that that's a lot of where we see some growth with HubSpot. I know, when we're thinking about sort of the smart CRM and everything that HubSpot is, when we first heard about it years ago, it was a marketing tool, beginning. And now I think that we are starting to see associations move away from those traditional monolithic facilitation management systems that had everything, right? It would be the events, your learning, commerce, your membership dues, into systems that are more commercially viable and have proper integration points to do so, moving towards things like LearnUpon. So are you guys seeing on the HubSpot side of the house that not necessarily like decoupling from some of these traditional systems, but where the product is headed, allowing folks to make some of those decisions that are a little bit more agile and focused on like their process and their results, their ability to integrate multiple different things, talking about commerce and learning, um, as a growth, a platform for growth?
Well, one thing that Jen mentioned, and I think this is so. I remember some time ago I was doing a course on Coursera, and I remember seeing a stat that a lot of people start those, but not many people complete them. And I think it's a common issue. Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like it's a common issue in the sort of online learning space that people are enthusiastic, but then you get like massive drop-offs. So I think having a tool that allows you to respond quickly, it's almost like we used to think that like, you build it and then people will take the course and your job is done. But it feels like now actually a lot of the work has to be done to make sure bring people back to their courses and make sure they actually finish, be able to be agile and be able to respond quickly. So I think that's like table stakes at this point, having these modern tools that allow you to act quickly, because it's really almost like it's after the course has been started that the real trouble starts, and you want to actually see through completion. Jen, I don't know if that's
Yeah.
you're seeing it.
It is absolutely true. And let's face it, if you think about your own role, if training is put in front of you, particularly if it's security 101 or compliance training, whatever it might be, there's a big sigh, isn't there? There's a big, oh, do I really have to do this?
Right.
I think we need to make learning really easy for learners to consume. We really have to do that. We've got to start making it more concise. We've got to start making it more consumable in biteable chunks so that we're not actually expecting learners to sit through 2 and 3 hours of a course. And that's what we're seeing with customers as well. They're really a lot more clever around the type of stuff they're putting in front of their learners. Associations in particular have really complex learning needs. I mean, they've huge member bases. We could be talking about millions of reach there, varying learning paths. They've got certification requirements where they need to certify their learners. We will provide that functionality to allow them to do that. But it gets very sophisticated when you think about a learning journey. And if I can just describe it like this, it's like a tree that branches off. So the trunk being the actual content or the course, and then you can branch off in lots of different directions. If you've got an association with millions of learners or millions of members that they want to reach, think about how sophisticated that gets. And as Guillaume says, how do we as learning leaders or as people in this space try and keep our learners engaged? What sort of work are we doing to help ensure that happens? And that's what we do in LearnUpon, and using the likes of HubSpot as well to help automate that learner onboarding, so that when a new contact is added to HubSpot, it's really cool. A customer or a partner, HubSpot will then trigger a workflow that enrolls them in one of these learning journeys within LearnUpon. It's a very slick integration, and it serves members really well.
Yeah, I'm interested as we continue to evolve and where business systems move, like the ease of use of connecting these things, of integrating and moving those things together. But one of the things that you both have touched on that I want to spend a minute here talking about is sort of the strategy around it and how to sort of tackle each of those pieces. We're talking about millions of members. Everybody's going to want something differently, and building an Amazon of learning is just not a feasible task to take on. So building things into bite-sized pieces makes a lot of sense to me. we aren't the first people that have spoken about this connected learning and communications and like marketing and learning being put together. But I do think that and we're actually working on a joint sort of market research survey to learners, associations, marketing professionals to try and prove. I think that this is an issue worth tackling. One of the things that we've seen in some of the initial responses is it's almost like an assembly line of content. The learning team creates a course around XYZ. They send the information to marketing, and then marketing puts together a campaign and sends that out. But that closed loop gets stuck. There isn't a feedback, capacity, or a we're seeing somebody drop off here, or this course is completed and not this one. Um, so when we think about like the strategic aspect of making all of these come to life, um, Jen, I don't know if you have an example of a customer that you think is doing that well, where they are constantly working with one another in order to facilitate the best use of the tools that they have invested in. That
Yep.
makes sense.
Absolutely. I do. I've got a customer in mind, one of our associations, one of our large associations in the education space in the US, and they've seen huge success. I'll give you an example. So they used to have a really low rate of re-enrollment in their certification program. So part of what they do is they certify their members to actually, and that certification will actually allow or empower them to take certain college courses, believe it or not, depending on how sophisticated that gets. But it's a pretty cool setup. Once they integrate our LMS, so LearnUpon with HubSpot, what they did was they started to set up these automated journeys that then reminded their learners of the renewal windows and suggested additional learning paths. So we started bringing skills into the equation. And even though we're a learning management system, we're not an LXP, nor do we ever claim to be, nor will we ever claim to be, but we are starting to dip our toes into the skills pool. And what that means is, yes, we're in an LMS. We essentially are best at hosting your content and at rolling it out and then on reporting. But we can allow your learners to we can learn from your learners' behavior now. AI is going to play a huge part in this, of course, and we'd be remiss if we weren't jumping on that bandwagon. So we're taking a lot of AI parts into our product as well, and that's where we're seeing success. So we're bringing the likes of course recommenders in, where when a learner has consumed a particular course or a learning journey, content can then be pushed their way from a free catalog or a public catalog based on what they've consumed previously. We also have an email reminder that comes out, and a reflections coach that actually sends an email out asking the learner, what did you think about that? Here's what I think the content, really engaging with the learner afterwards. So we've seen associations see huge success in trialing out some of these new AI plugins or pieces of functionality that we can actually offer as part of an optimized learning management system. We do, of course, have customers that use both HubSpot and LearnUpon and an LXP. So that's really getting very sophisticated. So you've got your CRM system, you've got your HubSpot, you've got your LXP, and then you've got your learning management system. That's when a lot of magic can happen there. But you can keep it quite simple. I always say, and I said it at the start, start small. It should not be an overwhelming task. You should really, if you've never tried, integrating some of these systems before, start really small. You don't need a massive transformation to start delivering segmented experiences. You can do it slowly. And one of the easiest wins is by integrating your learning management system with your CRM system. That will unlock the data that you can then use to deliver all of that relevant content to re-engage your inactive members.
Yeah, I really like that. I couldn't agree more. I think, Guillaume, kind of piggybacking off of that, if you're thinking about some of those small wins, we're getting information into HubSpot, from these disparate systems. Have you seen or worked with partners or had customers where, something small that you can think of, it becomes incredibly impactful and helps to scale? Because I think one of the challenges we're talking about here is like, creating learning content and putting it in place with sort of marketing communication strategies. That's a long process in and of itself. So how have you seen anything or sort of any small steps that you've seen with customers or partners that you've worked with where something like that unlocks the ability to be more efficient internally?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that everybody should try is just adding the HubSpot tracking code on your website, for example, is a very small step. And in fact, it's available even at the free level. So if you've never heard of HubSpot, but you want to try it out, sign up for free, throw the tracking code on your website. And that way you start tracking anytime a visitor comes to your website, you'll be able to tracking their movements. And I know it might sound a little bit creepy. But unfortunately, that's how the world works these days. But then you can actually see, like, again, all the pages they've been to. So that's literally takes about, you can set that up in less than a minute and get a ton of return on that investment. The other piece that we talked about previously, but another thing that makes a huge difference to all this is tracking your revenue as well. And HubSpot makes it super easy, right? So the integration between LearnUpon and HubSpot allows you to track learner data back to what we call deals in HubSpot. And so you have full visibility as to, which of your contacts, which again, you're tracking them on the website, you're tracking their progress on the courses, and you also see just from a monetary value, what have they done, what have they purchased, what have they transacted, assuming it's appropriate for your association. So these are like very simple things that don't take a whole lot to set up that people can mess around with.
Yeah, I like that. I think we try and harp our projects and our strategy on, bottom line dollar generating activities, right? We're talking a ton about the strategy of creating content. One of the things that Jen alluded to was the different kinds of association learning that there is. There are folks that are credentialing and certifying bodies where, to belong to and be a member, these are have to learning journeys. I have to renew.
Yeah.
My wife's a therapist. She has to go and get her CEs every 2 years. Like, that is a requirement in order to do her job. There are also the want tos, folks that have built out learning paths and continuing ed for their members and constituents that aren't required by their profession, but should be a value add to the ecosystem and focus that way. And so setting things up in a simple way like this, connecting commerce, when we're talking about things like LearnUpon and HubSpot specifically, connecting, the not just the activities, but the actual dollars helps to shape the ecosystem for where you can apply your strategy to. If we're seeing this learning path is a revenue driver, and what is driving people to, you're sending emails to these folks. Is it coming from our newsletters, coming from the site? How we merchandised well, within sort of the LearnUpon tool for the commerce aspect. Are we grouping things appropriately? Have we done things like that? I think seeing the results of those things without having a strategy in place can help kickstart where effort should be spent. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. Yeah. I think what we've seen a lot as well lately, particularly in the last maybe 12 to 15 months, is customers and associations using LearnUpon not just as, a boring training platform anymore, but actually as what I said, alluded to earlier, part of their overall member value strategy, because that's what they're all after. If you sit an association down, it doesn't matter if they're in the finance space, it doesn't matter what space they're in, they're after member value. And that's what a lot of their strategy is behind what they're trying to do. So we look at metrics as well. I mean, metrics is a big part of this. We need to have what we call result strategies with all of our associations. So we will sit down and figure out, what are your objectives? What are your, how are you going to get to those objectives? What sort of solutions are you going to put in place to get there? And we revisit that regularly as part of a customer success team. That's what we do with our associations. It's part of the package you get as a customer of LearnUpon. I think HubSpot is set up quite similar as well. But we're looking at the likes of what active learners have we got in the system this month? How fast were you able to deliver courses? How were they consumed? Have we increased adoption off the back of that? Have we shifted from this compliance only approach, which was always, bread and butter for the LMS, was the compliance training, the static, security 101. And I'm not going to diss compliance training. We know how important it is. It is our bread and butter, but we've moved and we've seen a shift from just using a learning management system for that onto strategic engagement tools. So, and that's where we bring in the likes of HubSpot to get really cool and really sophisticated with it. So that's where we see our member growth and retention is through using those systems and that professional development then approach that they then adopt, where we sit down and figure out what sort of skills do we need off the back of the content that this learner has taken this month. I mean, you can spend hours and hours and hours looking at these trends and reports and use it then to drive future programs, and you can get as sophisticated as you want with it, or you can keep it really simplistic. But one thing we do well is we partner long term with associations to evolve their learning programs. It's not the short haul here. It's the long game, and that's why I say start small, because it can be really overwhelming if you've got millions of members. Even if you've got 1,000 members, it still can be quite overwhelming. The same principles apply. So that's what we spend a lot of time doing, is sitting down and trying to understand that strategic goal. Where do they want to get to? What are their results strategies? What sort of success metrics should we be focusing on? NPS is important to these guys as well. They want to understand, how are we doing? Members, how are we doing? Where are we falling down? So that's a big part of what we do with our associations as well.
We are a LearnUpon customer ourselves, American Eagle is, and we enroll ourselves in those journeys for exactly that. We have yearly training. We also do like internal podcasts through the platform, and like customer stories. Here's a quick, if you want to spend a couple minutes and learn about this customer that we had a particularly interesting project for. But taking it from that security 101, checking your handbook, compliance tools, into things that are engaging for even employees. Those same principles, I think, make a ton of sense across the board. One thing I'd be remiss, or we would be, is to, we've touched on it a little bit, but start talking about sort of how AI plays into all of these things and where that goes. One of the things that we've touched on is this, using AI to deliver experiences that match that person's goal. And this is maybe like a personal question I have, is there going to be a point when we become jaded by some of that, like hyper personalization and, sort of the sterility of what AI can be in some ways? It's like, the answers are just too perfect, or, the text prompt is like incredibly grammatically correct. And, is there, sort of a space there where, we're obviously not there yet, but, all of this data in the same place, it's almost like every system, every company, every organization you interact with knows everything about you. So I know, Guillaume, you guys are, so much of where HubSpot is moving towards is sort of the AI powered platform. Are there, sort of thoughts or considerations that you guys have around, sort of what is the right dials to turn in order to make this impactful and not to 1984, or almost like all the way through the pendulum to like too tailored in a way that doesn't feel authentic? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think it's going to depend on the data, right? I think it's very hard to make any kind of general statement about this. Are there going to be segments of the population that are going to be like, you know what, this is getting too creepy, too personal, way too much about me? Absolutely. And there are folks who are going to be, you know what, kind of expect this at this point, so bring on the personalization. I'm ready for it. But again, I think you need to have a tool that gives you that data. So if the numbers are pointing in the right direction, if you're generating the revenue that you want to be generating, then I wouldn't worry as much. I will say that, though, that we are definitely all in on AI at HubSpot. There's no question about this. I do think one thing that you do have to watch out with AI tools, and you can see this when you use ChatGPT, for example, it's a tendency to be very, it kind of wants to pump you up all the time, and kind of like, you're always great, you're always right. And so I think we want to make sure that we're pushing back against that. You don't want an AI tool that's just a yes, a yes robot, basically. So I think that's one consideration. But again, I think just set up your, I would say, as long as you have the right reporting, as Jen said, and you're tracking the right KPIs, then you'll know if the learning isn't landing the way it's supposed to. If you're tracking NPS, which, by the way, we can track at HubSpot as well. I think everybody should be tracking that type of sentiments in your CRM. Again, if the sentiments you're paying attention, people are saying, you know what, that was a cool lesson, but I got a bit creepy towards the end when I knew something about my dog. That's where you have to be careful, and you have to be sort of reactive. But you got the reporting, you have a tool that allows you to react quickly, then I think you'll be in good shape.
I think anybody that's talking to me about my dog I'll be paying attention. I think that's like, it's just the easy way in. Um, but no, I agree. And, Jen, you alluded to this earlier, sort of where does, it's not an LXP, but how can AI help to facilitate some of that internal efficiency? And maybe it is, focused on the organization rather than, delivering content to their folks. But, sort of before we wrap here, if you guys have an opinion or you have an opinion on sort of where you're seeing learning professionals and organizations that are adopting these sorts of tools, and your sort of posture on what AI can be.
Sure. So AI it's exciting. I think we're living through a really exciting time when it comes to technology and where it can go. I think we will look back in 10, 15 years. It's moving quite quickly now. I do expect it to slow down at some point, because like anything, when a new piece of really cool, like the internet, when it first started, everybody, it was a million miles an hour. And just to go back before I talk about how AI is enhancing what we're doing, I do really genuinely feel the human insight will always, always be required. There is no risk, in my view, of us ever being completely replaced here. Only humans will understand your organizational goals, your culture, your compliance needs. You decide what the training, what training matters. The algorithm is not going to decide that. So I think that's just something to bear in mind while we look at this. Optimizer really is what we should see it. Enhancer. How can it enhance what we're doing? Well, it's really working hard in the background to help personalize a lot of the learning that we're looking at. And I did allude to this earlier, not just personalize putting your first name in the start of a mail merge, but actually looking at your behavior. What is your behavior? What sort of job role have you got? Where are your skill gaps? And are you feeding that into the LMS based on some of the courses that you're taking from the catalog? Because AI has the intelligence to actually take that information and say, okay, they've taken this course, this course, this course. We need to push them in this direction. And that's what we're actually doing with AI right now. We're using it in a really intelligent way to assess performance so that training is a lot more relevant and engaging. And that actually takes hours and hours away from some of the likes of myself, where we sit down and look at, L&D goals and what sort of things that we should be looking at. The other thing that it can do is be really clever about recommending content, again, based on historical behavior. We can suggest additional learning resources. We can talk to you about what sort of videos you should be looking at, what articles should you be consuming. Is there micro learning that might help here? How do we tailor your content to your learning style? And again, automation, scalability, they're the two buzzwords when it comes to AI. Scalability, automation. I mean, that's really what it's all about. Grading, quizzing, any sort of exams or assessments that you actually use for your learners. AI is really good when it comes to that. We can generate exam pool questions based on content. It'll scan thousands and thousands and thousands of characters and actually come up with 10 really cool exam questions for you. I mean, that would take you hours of dissemination information to do. Language chatbots. So we're looking at chatbot and LearnUpon right now. So how is that going to, evolve over time? It's only going to get more and more exciting. So I think the possibilities here are endless. It's exciting. But it's not time for us to worry. There will always be human insight required, and we'll always need that empathic human, side of things. AI is going to just enhance what we do.
I really like that, especially when we're talking about associations, many of whom are stuck in small staffs or with limited resources. The tool sets that allow them to act bigger than they are and deliver bigger than they are, I think are the ones that are going to win at the end of the day. Starting small, prioritizing the connections that you have of the systems in place and allowing data and revenues to drive some of that strategy, I think are really where we'd recommend some of those things. We're excited about the future of where associations can continue to grow, and only sort of at the precipice of some of that growth. Jen, Guillaume, really appreciate both of your time today. An engaging conversation. If you want to learn more about LearnUpon, LearnUpon.com, HubSpot, HubSpot.com. Thanks for listening to the Lessons for Tomorrow podcast. If you're interested in contributing to our market research survey, please fill out the survey in the link in the podcast description. Find out more about AmericanEagle.com services and today's topic in the description below. Like, comment, subscribe, share, tell your friends, tell your family. We'll be looking for you again I'm your host, Steven LaGow, and we'll catch you in the next lesson. Thanks again.